Hi, this is Professor Cordes, and this is the Week 5 lecture video for English 113 composition. This week, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking about literary analysis and what that means and how do we articulate our ideas well within writing. So the first thing that we need to do is to understand what analysis, the idea of to analyze something, and what that actually means. Okay, so let me set the stage for you. Here, I'm a secondary school teacher as well. Sorry about that. I'm a secondary school teacher as well. And one of my favorite things to do within the course of a year is when the anatomy class, the AP anatomy class, begins to dissect cats. That's my favorite part. Now, I'm not against cats. These cats have died of natural causes. We get them through scientific organizations. Like, it's a whole procedure. It's kind of like in middle school where you dissect a frog. They do one step further. They dissect a cat. Love it. And here's the deal why I love it is because I get to watch analysis happen in real life with tangible things. So what happens is I walk up to the science lab, and it's usually in the fall, and I watch these kids begin to cut up and dissect the cat. Now, dissecting is one thing. Dissecting is where you pull things apart, okay? And you begin to see what is what. So here is the heart, right? Here's the heart of the cat. Here are the intestines. Here is, let's say, like the liver, right? They pull out all of these things, and it's fun to watch the kids freak out. But the interesting and the analysis part comes in when they try to figure out how those different components relate to the entire cat as a whole. So what I'm saying is they will pull out the heart and they will begin to analyze it. They'll look at it and see like, okay, well, this valve connects to this over here. Oh, and this is the thing that pumps blood to get everything over here. This one is connected to this. Okay, great. And they'll plop it down. Then they'll pull out, let's say the liver, and they look at the liver and they how does this work? How does this liver work in conjunction to the entire cat? So what they're doing is they're looking at they'll pull out the intestines, right? They'll look at the intestines and be like, how does this connect to here? Oh, this is the spot where it digests the food. And here's where it comes out over here. And here's what they do. Like, they figure out these small little components and they understand how it connects back to the entire cat. So for us to analyze something, we pull things apart and we look at them and figure out how does this small little thing work into the bigger picture. Okay. Mechanics do this all the time. They open up the hood of your car, they go in, they pull out, gears and cogs, and also they just pull your engine apart and they begin to see like, okay, this valve over here isn't functioning like it should, and that's why the transmission isn't working. This, tube or whatever is clogged, and so therefore it can't. Like, they begin to figure out, well, how does this small piece connect to the bigger engine to make it all work? So for you, ladies and gentlemen, for your literary analysis, you're going to go to a book or a story that you're familiar with. I would strongly suggest going to a story that you are familiar with, and go in there and begin to pull apart things and understand what is the bigger concept? What is the bigger idea? Okay, so let's pause right now and understand what is the story that we're going to use. Okay, what is the general idea? What is the concept? How are we going to analyze? Well, what are we going to analyze? That's the biggest question. So looking here, find a short story. Find a story that you're familiar with. If you have recently watched a movie and it kind of intrigued you about something, maybe that's the film that you want to analyze. It does say here, it says reads like a work of literature. However, you can kind of make that a little bit broader because what I'm looking for is the analytical skills. Okay. Yes, it is literary analysis. So I would strongly suggest going to a story, going to a short story, going to something that you are from, a fairy tale. Maybe you haven't read a book in years, but you remember the story of Cinderella. Maybe that's what you analyze. Maybe you recently watched a film and it has a book, and so you could quickly read the book. But again, think of something. Okay, we're not going to spend all the time this week reading. We need to spend this time writing. Okay. but you do need to have a story. Short stories are always good. Think back to maybe high school and some of the stories that you read in class, like, oh, I think we read Lord of the Flies. I think that was one of the books that we read. I think my senior year we read Hamlet. Like, just kind of begin to think of some things that you would have reference to, and then do some research to find out more about that. Okay. Now, once you have your story, your goal and idea is to go into that story and to begin to pull things out that you find interesting. Now, one thing, and that kind of correlates to your thesis statement. Okay. Your thesis statement, let me find it here for us. You're doing the discussion board post this week for your thesis. The thesis is a statement about the point you're trying to prove. What is it about Hamlet that you are trying to prove? What is it about the film that you just watched that you're trying to prove? What is it after you begin to pull things apart that's plausible? Okay. Is it realistic? Is it tangible for the material that you're working with? Okay. You don't necessarily, for literary analysis, you don't necessarily go way outside of the text. You stay inside the text. So let me give you some concrete examples. One year, one of my seniors, she came up to me and she said, Mr. Cordes, it was a big research project, big literary analysis. The great thing is that they got to pick their book. Okay. And she came up to me and she's like, hey, Mr. Cordes, I really want to look at Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is a kid's book. And being an AP Lit senior, she went off to UCLA to get her degree in literature, went off to get her master's in like literacy linguistics. She's brilliant. She came up to me and she was like, I want to analyze this children's book. And I said, well, okay, let's talk about this. And she says, well, Mr. Cordes, haven't you ever noticed that when Willy Wonka takes all of those kids into his chocolate factory, he purposefully and specifically tempts them based upon their own weaknesses, their own, like it's an individualized temptation. And I said, well, yeah, that's pretty true. So then my question was, all right, well, what's the point you're trying to prove? What is your thesis statement? She says, well, Willy Wonka is Satan. You didn't realize that? Willy Wonka is Satan. And I just kind of paused and I was like, all right, let's dig into this. Now, we had done prior a character analysis on Satan using Milton's Paradise Lost, Screwtape Letters, pieces of scripture. We began to holistically look at a character, and we used Paradise Lost as our foundation. So she was taking her prior knowledge of what Satan is like and applying it to this character. And I said, well, talk to me more. She's like, Willy Wonka has, her thesis statement was Willy Wonka is a Satan-like character because he tempts according to people's weaknesses, right? And if you think about all those characters, they are pulled into what they really want and desire, okay? And he doesn't do anything. He actually is like Satan. He doesn't like push Augustus Gloop into the chocolate river. He just stands there and watches him fall, right? Veruca Salt wants the squirrel and goes after it, and he's just like, oh, must have been a bad nut. Like he doesn't actually do anything. The kids do it on their own, but he tempts them with stuff that they desire. And so it was really good. And the great thing is that she was able to prove that in her writing by having those reference points of each character to come back. So you are looking at a text to understand what's in here that's interesting, and what is the point I'm trying to prove, and how can I prove that to connect my ideas back to my thesis. Okay. I've had people talk about the story of Cinderella and how there is child abuse, like the mental, emotional child abuse that's placed upon by the stepmother. And they begin to identify that Cinderella is this abused child who uses her imagination to escape the torment that she's in. I've had people look at The Wizard of Oz and analyze that from a religious standpoint, looking at the scarecrow for his brains, Tin Man for his heart, the lion for courage, and looking how that encompasses a person's faith and how that refers back to Dorothy's faith of wanting to go home as much as possible throughout the entire text. I've had people look at Alice in Wonderland from a critical point of, if everything is opposite, what does that say about Alice? And Alice really having her insecurities, and then therefore the opposite is confidence. So you really go into a text, and if you look here right at the top, it says you're highlighting a theme, a character, a plot feature, an aspect of a setting. You are pulling something apart to refer back to what it's like. So you could take the Star Wars films and look at it from a heroic standpoint. How does, our protagonist go through the different Star Wars films and is on this hero's quest, this hero's journey, right? How do you kind of take an idea and then move it back? Like, how do you analyze that? Excuse me. I get so excited about literary analysis simply because it is, you get to be the scholar. You get to jump into a text and begin to pull things apart. So reading Harry Potter, the idea of good versus evil, and where do we see that within the text, right? There's this idea of how is magic being used? Is it for good or for evil? There's ways that we can go into a text and pull things apart and understand, how does this work for the bigger concept? Go into the anatomy class, cut up the cat, pull out everything. Okay, all of these pieces are here, yet look at how they are connected. And that goes back to your thesis statement. Okay, so you come up with a thesis statement as far as what you want to prove, and then you begin to pull things out and say, well, look at this example, it helps prove my thesis. Look at this example here, helps prove my thesis. Okay, so just like my student went through the different, like, look how Mike TV was pulled into the idea of broadcasting, being on television, being a part of something that he is involved in every day, and then suddenly it becomes his demise, right? How does that work? How is that connecting back to the point that you are trying to prove overall? Okay. Now, these ideas are actually better fleshed out when you have a chance to talk to someone. If you need to email me, please, I love breaking apart and doing a literary analysis. So if you have questions or concerns, please email me. I would suggest starting with, what is the work that I want? Okay, what is a story that I'm familiar with that I can refer back to and be extremely familiar with for this? Okay, start there. Then think of, well, what do I want to prove? What do I want to pull apart and figure out how it works? So when you go into, okay, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a story. I picked Lord of the Flies, looking at my bookshelf right now. If I picked Lord of the Flies, because I read that in high school, and all these boys are trapped on an island about to kill each other, what does that say about our society? And how the absence of law and rules suddenly makes us go savage. And so how is that reflected in our characters? How do they slowly transform into this savage nature? So think back of what you got, brainstorm ideas. Don't waste any time. Begin to think, and process through this so that you are able to get a quality draft done by the end of the week. Okay. Please email me if you have any questions or you want to bounce ideas around. We can totally collaborate. I would love to help. Let me know. Hopefully I didn't scare you off with the cutting of the cat, but again, that's part of analysis. Okay. Take care. Have fun with this assignment. Let me know what you're doing. I'll talk to you guys soon.